At 6, the Home Secretary warns of a hurricane of mass migration and says politicians have been too squeamish about tackling it.
The wind of change that carried my own parents across the globe in the 20th century was a mere gust compared to the hurricane that is coming.
It's not the first time the Home Secretary has been outspoken in her language, and some say about time too, a politician willing to be candid. Others say she's being reckless.
Also tonight, a man and a boy are in hospital after being struck by lightning at a school football match during yesterday's storm. The 12-year-old is in a serious condition. We talked to the family who've won their battle to get the law changed after their daughter was killed by the father of her children. And space junk, how a satellite company has been slapped with the first ever fine for leaving litter in space.
And on BBC London, stormy weather leaves a 12-year-old in a serious condition in hospital after he was hit by lightning while playing in a school football match.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. The Home Secretary has been centre stage at the Conservative Party conference today, warning delegates of what she called a hurricane of mass migration. Suella Braverman said politicians have been too slow to recognise the scale of the problem around the world and too squeamish to tackle it for fear of being called racist. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister continued to be pressed on whether or not the HS2 rail line to Manchester would be scrapped. He said he won't be rushed into making a decision. Our political editor, Chris Mason, reports from Manchester.
Please welcome the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman.
Not many here can pack out the conference hall. Fewer still prompt folk to get to their feet. But Suella Braverman can do both. She's long been outspoken on immigration and willing to use language others might balk at. And so it was again this afternoon.
Now, one of the most powerful forces reshaping our world is unprecedented mass migration. The wind of change that carried my own parents across the globe in the 20th century was a mere gust compared to the hurricane that is coming.
The Home Secretary suggested before hundreds of millions of people are on the move around the world.
We are on your side. Thank you.
Look at the reaction to her speech. Many here and beyond agree with her instincts, but some of her colleagues think her choice of words is irresponsible.
You know, I think it's really important that as politicians we are mindful of our words. We are there to form policy, we are there to guide the country. And I think we have to be very careful that we don't create a situation where we are either demonising minorities or those who are vulnerable.
The Prime Minister, for one, is scrupulously careful with his own language. Here he was first thing, limbering up for a day of scrutiny. And one question he's been swerving for 3 weeks now, and still is. Prime Minister, you're promising this week long-term decisions for a brighter future. Will you announce your decision tomorrow on HS2?
I know there's a lot of speculation on this, but what I can say is I'm going to approach this the same way I approach everything, thoughtfully, carefully, across the detail, and making what I believe is the right decision in the long term for our country.
Here's why there's been the flurry of questions on HS2. A government document photographed in Westminster last month revealing ministers were looking again at the project, which has prompted an angry row ever since.
I think it'd be a great tragedy to cancel HS2. It's the biggest levelling up project the country has got. And in the end, if you want to make long-term decisions, and I fully support Rishi Sunak in wanting to make those long-term decisions, that includes huge investments in infrastructure like HS2.
But others say it's an expensive mistake.
What good is it that little old lady sat looking through her bungalow window at a train going by at 120 mile an hour on a train that she'll never get on, ever, because she never goes to London or Birmingham or Manchester or anywhere. She can't even get from her village to the next village to a doctor's appointment or to see her friend. What a load of nonsense.
But Rishi Sunak hasn't got long to do stuff and boost his popularity, and so avoid being another former Prime Minister flogging their memoirs before long. And his challenge here is that it's felt like he's been drowned out by others, and not just late at night. This is your first party conference as Prime Minister, but everyone's voice here seems louder than yours, Prime Minister. Is this what leadership looks like?
Actually, the spirit of this conference is great. Just yesterday, the Chancellor announced an increase in the national living wage. That's a £1,000 pay rise for 2 million people. On Sunday,
it was overshadowed by Liz Truss turning up and commanding an entire room, or the Conservative Mayor of the West Midlands saying what he was saying about HS2.
Well,
they were dominating the agenda,
if you look at,
not
no,
you.
they're not. The things I'm talking about are making a real difference to people.
The conference, the country waits to see what the Prime Minister's departure from HS2 will look like and what more he has to say in his speech here tomorrow. Chris Mason, BBC News in Manchester.
Well, tomorrow Rishi Sunak will address the conference. Will he make clear the future of the HS2 high-speed rail line between Birmingham and Manchester? This is what was originally promised. The first phase, which is under construction now, would run from London to Birmingham, with the second phase seeing the line extend to Manchester, Crewe and Leeds. It was expected to reduce the travel time between Manchester and London to just over 1 hour, but it's been getting more and more expensive to build. Our analysis editor, Ros Atkins, has been looking at the rising price of HS2.
The shift in the estimate of HS2's cost is considerable. In 2013, the government said it would cost £37.5 billion. By 2020, the estimate was put at between 72 and 98 billion, which begs the question, why the change? Well, here are 4 reasons. The first is what a House of Commons Library report calls optimism bias. In other words, that original estimate of HS2's cost was wishful thinking. A 2020 National Audit Office report concluded the Department for Transport and HS2 Limited underestimated the complexity. The risk of rising costs was also underestimated. The Institute for Government think tank says HS2 Limited added less than half the contingency that Crossrail in London added during its early development stages. There was a failure to properly estimate both the cost and the risk of it going up. The second reason is what's called ground conditions. In other words, how difficult it would be to lay the line. In 2019, the chair of HS2 admitted the budgets were derived from desktop drawings without the benefit of any investigation of ground conditions. Because of that, in the words of the National Audit Office, construction will require more structural reinforcement and a greater amount of time than was originally anticipated. Doing a budget based on drawings didn't accurately assess the work. Those are 2 reasons for rising costs. A third is that the plan for HS2 has changed, not least the number of tunnels. After local opposition in the Chilterns, more of HS2 is underground than originally planned, and that has cost a lot more. There's one more reason to highlight: inflation. It has gone up sharply since 2021. That makes everything more expensive, including materials, wages, and equipment. Put all of those factors together, and we start to explain why the original estimate of HS2's cost wasn't remotely realistic.
Ros Atkins there. So let's go back to Manchester. Chris Mason is there. We await this decision on HS2, Chris, and the Home Secretary, meanwhile, grabs the attention.
Yeah, the whole HS2 decision feels like that slow stopping service that chugs along and feels like it takes forever to get to where you want to get off. But as we were reflecting a few minutes ago, there's complexity in this decision from the government. What are they going to do instead? And they've had to accelerate their decision making because they've been dogged for 3 weeks by this question that they're ducking about precisely what they're going to do. So what will we hear on that from the Prime Minister tomorrow? Then there is this debate on immigration and the Home Secretary's choice of language. An important context to reflect on here, 2 bits of context. One is that net migration into the country at the moment is at a record high. And one of the central promises of Brexit was that that would come down. And there are people I speak to in government who feel that that promise has been broken and they've got to work out what to do about it and be candid about the trade-offs in getting that number down. Then there is the issue of illegal migration, particularly small boat crossings. Those in government say they feel like they're making progress on that, but the numbers are still big there too. So a huge challenge for government to wrestle with on an issue that is a priority for many, and where plenty in government and beyond will acknowledge privately that ministers over the years have been failing. So that's that context into which Suella Braverman's language, which some love and some hate, is uttered. Tomorrow, though, the attention turns back to the Prime Minister. He is trying to reset his premiership, grab attention, seize the agenda and haul himself back into a competitive place in the opinion polls. So the pressure is on. His speech is tomorrow lunchtime.
Chris Mason, thank you. Now, extraordinary scenes. This was the huge fireball that lit up the sky in Oxfordshire yesterday evening when a food waste recycling site was hit by lightning. Fire crews were at the scene throughout the night trying to put out the fire. Meanwhile, a man and a boy are in hospital after being struck by lightning at a school football match in Hertfordshire. Frankie McCamley has the latest on that. Frankie.
Well, Sophie, it was yesterday afternoon at around 5 o'clock that there was a boys' football tournament taking place across these football pitches. People say it was raining lightly and they could see lightning really far in the distance. But then suddenly they heard a huge crack and a thud, and then lightning struck this pitch just behind me. A young boy and a man were both hit and all the footballers fell to the ground, and that is when panic ensued. Emergency services were called to the Seal School in Hertford at around 5:20. Police cars and ambulance crews drove onto the pitch to treat the man and a 12-year-old boy, just after staff on site, including Sophie, had rushed to provide first aid.
When I got to the field, there was a young person who was already being looked after by our lead first aider, who had a defibrillator with him, and by other first aiders, and there was another casualty on the other side of the field who didn't have a first aider with them, so I went to that person.
The man was taken to Princess Alexandra Hospital in Harlow for further care. The young boy was taken to Addenbrooke's Hospital in Cambridge and is still in a critical condition. A few miles down the road, the head teacher at the boys' school praised the quick-thinking first aiders at the match.
All we know for sure is that he was hit by lightning. We know that he was immediately seen by first aiders who were on site. We know that somebody ran in and Seal School did everything right. They rang the ambulance, which came pretty much immediately. A number of ambulances came.
Nearly 1,500 lightning strikes were detected across southern England as storms developed in the afternoon and into the evening. And yesterday they did strike twice, hitting a waste food management plant in Cassington in Oxfordshire, causing a huge fireball that lit up the night sky, turning it a shade of orange.
Oh my God.
The huge flames caused by methane gas escaping were caught on camera by passers-by. Residents heard a huge bang, with some losing power in their homes.
An enormous flash, followed by a very, very loud bang. I just assumed it was a lightning strike very nearby. A couple of minutes later, my neighbour emailed me and said, I've just heard this huge bang and flash, and I've looked outside and there's a red glow in the sky. And I sort of said to her, oh, it's possible, I suppose, it hit the digestive system at Wharton.
Well, despite the damage, the site has reopened today with 2 of the 5 tanks still operating. We've seen trucks coming and going throughout the day, as well as emergency services that do remain on the scene and will do so for the next few days. Frankie McCamley, BBC News.
A 13-year-old boy has pleaded guilty to death by dangerous driving after killing a 60-year-old woman by running her over with her own car. Marcia Grant died in Sheffield in April. Our North of England correspondent Danny Savage is in Sheffield.
Sophie, this is the road in South Sheffield where this awful incident took place earlier this year, and I suppose the most shocking part of this case is the age of the defendant, 12 years old at the time of the crime, now 13, pleading guilty today to killing another person who, by all accounts, was held in huge esteem by everybody who knew her. But now these are the consequences that this young man will have to deal with for the rest of his life going forward.
Marcia Grant, described by her family as a warm, loving and dedicated wife, mother, grandmother, sister and friend, and a pillar of her community. She was run over and killed by a 12-year-old. One evening in April this year, Marcia, who lived on this road in Sheffield, tried to stop the boy from taking her car, which was parked on her driveway. She stood behind it, but the child in the driver's seat reversed the vehicle over her, causing catastrophic injuries. Today, he pleaded guilty to causing death by dangerous driving. This was the scene later that evening. At an earlier court hearing, the prosecution said the boy said to police at the time, "Is she dead? Looks like I got my first kill." And, "It was an accident, I swear." The defence said the issue was what could be inferred from those comments. After today's guilty plea, detectives made this statement.
Since Marcia's death, our thoughts have been with her family and friends who have lost a loved one under the most tragic of circumstances. They will have to live with the heartbreaking consequences of that evening for the rest of their lives.
The boy, who is now 13, is too young to be publicly identified. He'll be sentenced for killing Marcia Grant in December. Danny Savage, BBC News, Sheffield.
The fashion chain Abercrombie & Fitch says it has hired an outside law firm to investigate claims surrounding its former boss. A BBC investigation uncovered allegations that Mike Jeffries exploited young adult men for sex at events he hosted in his New York homes and hotels around the world, including in London and Paris. He has not responded to the claims. There's growing concern about the amount of space junk. This is NASA's computer-generated image of the debris currently orbiting Earth. Thousands of old satellites and parts of spacecraft that have just been left out there. The problem is that they pose a serious risk to satellites that are in use, as well as to the International Space Station, which has astronauts on board. Now the United States has issued its first fine for leaving junk in space, ordering the company responsible, Dish Network, to pay $150,000 for failing to take its satellite out of orbit by sending it off even further from Earth into a sort of satellite graveyard. The time is just after 6:15, our top story this evening. The Home Secretary warns of a hurricane of mass migration and says politicians have been too squeamish about tackling it. And coming up, one football fan's campaign to change the colour of the lights on a local bridge.
And at 6:30, we'll find out what you need to know about COVID with infection rates on the rise. Plus, David Beckham chats about his footballing roots and rise to stardom in a new documentary.
It's been a 2-year campaign, and today the parents of a young woman killed by the father of her children have won a battle to change the law. Jade Ward was murdered by Russell Marsh in 2021. Today, the Justice Secretary confirmed Jade's law would remove paternal rights from people who murder their partners. Hal Griffith reports.
Full of life, singing with friends or caring for her children, Jade Ward's family remember her as the glue which held them together. Their world fell apart when she was killed in her own home by her estranged husband.
She was always happy, she was always singing, she was an amazing mum. Everybody loved her, everybody loved her.
Russell Marsh attacked Jade as their 4 children slept. Despite being given a life sentence, he kept his parental rights. For Jade's family, the pain of losing her has been amplified by continuous contact from Marsh, asking for photographs and school reports of the children, leaving them feeling manipulated.
Everything he done was premeditated. He's got everything he done was premeditated, even when he butchered our daughter. That's all I can say, which he did. He already had the plan to control from prison.
Today, the government announced a change in the law. A convicted killer's parental rights will now be suspended if they're jailed for the murder of the other parent. It's all down to Jade's family's campaign.
No family should have to go through this. And thanks to their efforts, we will protect children and families by making their law a reality.
Watching back home in North Wales, it was hard for Paul and Karen to take it all in.
Every sleepless night, every uncontrollable sobbing, every pain that you feel. You know, it was just like, it was all worth it, because now, you know, Jade's legacy is going to be lasting.
Their hope is that the new law will act as a deterrent against violent crime and that other families won't face the same anguish that they've had to endure. Hywel Griffith, BBC News.
The second stage of the COVID public inquiry is underway. It will examine the key decisions made by Boris Johnson, his government and advisers in the early days of the pandemic. Planning for lockdowns, travel restrictions and social distancing will all be looked at. Our health editor, Hugh Pym, reports.
Remembering loved ones lost to COVID, families gathered for the opening of this latest phase of the inquiry with video messages played at the start of proceedings.
There's so many unanswered questions. We need answers.
Hopefully, they will learn from it. So, because I wouldn't wish this on anybody.
It's not just the fact that my dad died. It's the how and the why he died.
Some of the key questions were set out at the inquiry.
In the momentous decisions that the government took concerning the control of the virus, the lockdowns, the social restrictions, the shutting of businesses and schools, did the government serve the people well, or did it fail them?
The Inquiry Council said Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak and other ministers would be called to give evidence, and he quoted from a diary kept by the former Chief Scientific Advisor Sir Patrick Vallance, at one point saying Number 10 was in chaos as usual. The family's lawyer highlighted breaches of lockdown rules by those in authority.
The families urged the inquiry not to ignore the undermining of public messaging that these crass and disgraceful events caused. Whilst the vast majority of the country buckled down, complied, came together, some did not.
I didn't have the energy to have a conversation for very long. It would knock me out.
In 2020, I interviewed Ondine Sherwood, who had long COVID. She co-founded a campaigning group, and now with colleagues, they're represented at the inquiry.
It seems that thousands and thousands of people caught COVID before the lockdown, when we knew that COVID was rampant really in the population. We weren't measuring it, but it was clearly spreading massively.
This UK public inquiry is divided into modules. We've already heard about preparedness ahead of the pandemic. From today, the focus is on the government's response to COVID. The hearings will continue for 3 years, but it's this stage of the inquiry which families hope will explain decisions made by ministers. Hugh Pym, BBC News.
In other news, a worker who put plastic bags, rubber gloves and ring pulls in food destined for Nando's and the Ivy restaurant chain has been jailed for 3 years. 39-year-old Gary Jones admitted contaminating goods while working at a Worcestershire food factory. Just to be clear, the manufacturer, Harvey and Brockless, has said that no tampered products reached the restaurant's customers. A BBC investigation has revealed some security guards are not being properly trained. An undercover reporter paid extra money to complete a mandatory 6-day course in just 1.5 days. The Security Industry Authority, which regulates the security companies, has launched an investigation. Greg Mackenzie reports.
We want to lie, 100% lie.
The security industry is under scrutiny. This secretly filmed footage shows trainers cutting corners and faking timesheets, allowing untrained and unqualified security guards onto the front lines.
How many days did the course? 3 days. How many actual days? Oh, you know, 6 days.
Soon, the people on this course run by Steps Institution will be able to apply for a licence to be a security worker at arenas, live events, or nightclubs.
One Alpha, Team Bravo, Team Delta.
The trainer from K-Top College in this video is clearly heard giving his students the answers in what is meant to be a tough and rigorous exam designed to test their knowledge. In order to work as security staff at public events, you will have needed to have completed a Security Industry Authority approved 6-day in-person course, which includes first aid. But as the BBC's File on 4 programme has discovered, some companies are carrying out that training in less than a day and a half, and one, first aid wasn't even taught. An inquiry into the Manchester Arena terror attack in 2017 exposed a fatal lack of training for those meant to be protecting the public. 22 people died. Earlier this year, the BBC revealed how some security staff at the Brixton Academy in South London took bribes to let people into a sold-out gig. 2 people died in a crush. 23-year-old dog handler Gabby Hutchinson was working that night. We've told her family about what we've uncovered.
I think you can't put a price on people's safety, and that's exactly what they've done. They've said that safety isn't important, and within the industry, as we know and we've learned, a lot of people aren't trained to the right degree. And then there's people like Gabby who will do everything they can to train up and be as good as they can be, and it just puts them all to shame, and it puts their safety at risk and the public at risk. It's just not acceptable.
There are urgent calls for tighter regulations on security staff and those who train them. The Security Industry Authority, which regulates the industry, says it is now investigating, and our evidence indicates criminality, which they will be referring to the police. Despite our findings, Steps Institution deny the allegations, while K-Top College are yet to send us a response. Greg McKenzie, BBC News.
And you can hear File on 4's full investigation on BBC Sounds. Now, we all know loyal football fans will go to extraordinary lengths to support their team, but one Southampton fan is fighting for the right to get the colour of the lights on a bridge in the city changed from the blue of his rivals Portsmouth to the red of his cherished team. How's he doing it? Well, he's using an extraordinary ancient civic court that dates back 600 years and only sits once a year. Duncan Kennedy reports.
The Itchin Bridge, big, bold and very blue. So what's the problem? Well, blue is the colour of Portsmouth Football Club, Southampton's big South Coast rival. This bridge has got Southampton fans seeing red. That's why today they came here to a special court that dates back 600 years.
It is my pleasure as Sheriff to hold the court leet ceremony here today.
A court leet sits just once a year and deals with the more minor civic issues. This time, in the Battle of the Bridge Lights, it was the turn of a local taxi driver to make the case for change.
It's a simple request to change these LED lights from blue to red, and hopefully we can get these lights changed, and let's be proud red and white in Southampton.
These court cases began in 1549 and come complete with a jury of former mayors and dignitaries. They were asked if they accept the bridge case presentation.
Members of the jury, do you accept the presentment? Yes. Thank you very much indeed.
The jury nodded you through. Are you hopeful it'll go ahead?
I'm hopeful. I know one or two of the jury. There's a few I don't. So I'm just hoping that the case we've put forward comes through, and I think we certainly give it publicity. So that's got to stand in our favour anyway.
The jury decision to push for the light change isn't binding, but is influential. We did try to find some Portsmouth fans in Southampton to ask about the changes, but... Are you a Portsmouth football fan? God, no.
I'm definitely not a Portsmouth football fan.
Are either of you Portsmouth football fans?
No. Yeah?
You are?
No.
Southampton City Council here tell us the original idea behind making the lights blue was to make the bridge more visible to ships. But many here will tell you this is not about boats, but about a badge of honour. The council will make the final decision in December. Relegation for Portsmouth Blue or promotion for Southampton Red. In this city of saints, they'll all be hoping their leaders will see the light. Duncan Kennedy, BBC News, Southampton.
Time for a look at the weather now. Elizabeth Rizzini is with us. Hello.
Hello, thank you, Sophie. Some beautiful rainbows spotted today across the whole of the UK. It felt fresher, it was quite breezy. A day of sunshine, but also some showers around as well. A lovely photo here from Derbyshire and another one from the Highlands. Now, it's across the Western Highlands where we may well see quite a lot of rainfall within the next few days. In fact, most of the rain will be towards the north and the west, drier towards the south and the east. And then things will be warming up again as we head into the weekend. More on that in just a moment. But overnight tonight, the showers across England and Wales will be fading away. Lots of clear skies. It will feel chillier than it's been here in recent nights. But our weather front approaches western Scotland. It's going to bring quite a lot of heavy rain. It will be milder here underneath the cloud and the rain, of course. Localised weather warnings in force for that heavy rain across the southwest of Scotland. And that rain will just curl off towards the northeast of Scotland, pepping up for a time before our front sinks southwards across Northern Ireland and across the borders, perhaps into northern England as we head through the afternoon. Towards the north of the front, a few isolated showers, but also some sunshine, more sunshine across England and Wales. Temperatures again here in the mid to the high teens in Celsius. Let's take a look at Thursday, and it really doesn't take a long time at all for the next weather front to roll in. Across Northern Ireland, spells of rain here moving across western Scotland, throwing a lot more cloud further eastwards too. Best of the brightness in the south and the east. These will be the day's highs, but those temperatures are set to climb, and I'll just show you quickly why. If we zoom out towards Europe, now we've seen record-breaking October heat in mainland Spain. We've got high pressure building in from the south. The weather fronts are scooting around the area of high pressure. We draw in a southerly wind, and that warm air will be coming our way. So here's the outlook for our capital cities as we head through the weekend and into the start of next week. The mid-20s for London, the low to the mid-20s in Wales. Some debate about Scotland still.
Elizabeth, thank you. And that is it from us. Time now for the news where you are. Goodbye.